Hello, I am Lasse, and in this episode I will talk about the book The Witch Hunts by Robert Thurston, and it was first published in 2001. And the book was actually called something else first. It was called Wicca Witch Mother Goose or something like that. And I think it just didn't sell at all, or I don't know. So they actually changed the title, I think in 2008 or something. So that was I thought that was kind of funny that they had first another weird title, and then I guess it just didn't sell at all, but they thought it was a good book, and they chose a more dramatic title, The Witch Hunts. But the first title was Wicca is old form of witch, and then Mother Goose is a new form, and that was, I guess it was kind of the transition between calling it a Wicca, which was not that harmful, and then a witch, which is really harmful, then Mother Goose, which is just completely not harmful. I don't know. I think if they hadn't changed the title, I would probably not have found this book. And reason why I read this book, why I found it, or how I found it, was that I needed something. I was actually getting interested in the witch hunts because, you heard about, well, in the Middle Ages they used to burn witches, and why exactly did they do that? They thought they had a pact with the devil or something, but it's just this thing that's just so alien to us today. And I was also thinking about, because I think sometimes we have witch hunts in modern society. I don't know, they used to have witch hunts on gay people, or I don't know, just witch hunts on a lot of different, if people don't agree with something or held some, there's some views that's so taboo you can barely even mention them, or yeah. And sometimes we have witch hunts today, so I guess that's why I kind of got interested in just the phenomenon on witch hunts, because I think you can actually learn a lot to study some obscure historical phenomenons. Yeah. So I tried to research witch hunts, and I think I found this book by going on Amazon and just kind of Googling witch hunts, and I found this. So I think I found this on Amazon, and I read a couple of pages, which you can do on Amazon, and then it looked okay, and then I bought the book. And this sounds like a commercial for Amazon. It's just, I don't know. I don't know. Let's not talk about Amazon. But the reason why, I kind of read a lot of books, and I kind of wish that I could just borrow them at the library, because that would be completely free of charge. But I actually rip my books apart when I read them, because it's easier for me to read them that way. I can lie in bed. People, I always, for some reason, find it so funny when I explain them that I actually rip out my pages. I don't know. I don't think I've talked to one person where I mention it and they don't smile or laugh, and just, I don't know. I can't be the only one that does it in the whole world. Must be someone else that does it. Anyway, let's talk about witches, or let's talk about what this Bob guy, I guess, says about witches. So first of all, I actually I wrote down a few years when talking about this, just so I actually got some a bit facts. Anyways, the first recorded case of a witch burning was in Ireland in 1324, or witch execution, and the last one was in 1782 in Switzerland. So this is kind of the time frame where the whole thing happened, and it was mainly in Europe, and then also somewhat in America. We have the Salem witch trials, which is very famous. It was in America and Salem, I guess, where these few girls just started to accuse everyone of being witches. I haven't studied that too closely, but that's one of the most famous witch trials. But anyways, the most famous, or the peak period of burnings was between 1580 and 1630. That was where most of the witch burnings took place. One thing the author does stress, that in this whole period, one thing he says that we must know about witch burning was that it was very erratic. So it was very like it just like kind of flared up in one area maybe, and then a lot of towns in that area would kind of like start accusing women of being witches and start burning them. But it sometimes just a couple of 100 years would go by without nothing happening, and sometimes one city would burn a lot of witches, but the nearby city or the city right next to it would just like burn no witches. So it wasn't like, I guess, like the plague where it just swept through geographically and like time-wise as well. It's kind of like very erratic, and that's one of the reasons why kind of like it gets, he says that it's kind of hard to study because to explain exactly what was happening and why people started burning witches and why they stopped and why women were the majority of those burned. He says around 75% of the victims were female, and so therefore we kind of must, it's kind of relevant to ask why were more women why were more women victims than men. And there's a lot of talk about that, and some feminists and some women writers, they, and probably also some men, argue that it's kind of like it's just misogyny and it was a way to control the women. But then this author of this book, Robert Thurston, he addresses these theories, and one thing that he says that just because a society is misogynistic, like people hate women, and if a society tries to control women, why then burn them and why then as witches? And there's also some places more men were actually burned, though overall it's more women. And with the whole gender thing, also need to maybe ask, for example, he mentions how in the Soviet purges and all those people who died under Stalin, why were, most of them were men, so do we think that just because that's like a society that hates men, can't even remember what's that called, Marxist-Leninistic, I don't know, can't remember it. But it's pretty interesting that he talks a bit about this, because some authors are very strong on this and just says this is just men hating on women, and he doesn't quite agree with that. So we can also ask why did the whole thing start, and what was the foundations for this witch burning. And so he goes back in history, and I think I'm quite impressed with his overall knowledge of all these trends. Of course, it's hard for me to, of course, judge him because he knows much more about these things than I do, but it seems that he traces the connections up to how we started getting this image of the witch hunts. And one thing he says that's pretty important is how, for example, Jews were sometimes in a country, I think something like France and also England and the early Middle Ages, sometimes they would just expel the Jews. And he mentions the case of France, where they expelled the Jews, I think in around 1300, they expelled the Jews, I think a bit before. And he says the reason why was that the French king, he needed money, the Jews had a lot of money, and they were generally a part of the population that was kind of hated. So I think he said something like, the Jews, they eat children and they do satanic rituals, we need to expel them, and so they were expelled, and then the kingdom, they got a lot of riches. But that was not enough, because soon again the kingdom was in debt, they owed money, and so this time he actually went after the Knights Templars, and this was kind of like a monkish military order that had gotten really, really powerful. And the author here in this book, he says basically the French king needed money again, the Templars were very rich, and so he started accusing the Templars, the Templar leader and all the Templars for murdering infants, kiss the devil, and all these things. So they also got rid of the Templars, and then they got money again. So, and he says this is relevant, not because this was how the witches were burned, the king said we have to burn the witches, Because sometimes the witches were rich, so maybe you could say, okay, they got money. Other times the witches were just kind of poor people, just normal poor people. But he says it's kind of lays the foundation, because now we had this in the common culture that there's some groups out there that may murder infants and do satanic rituals at night. So now we had kind of this intellectual foundation where you could start to say, maybe this is a witch, maybe this is a magician, or something like that. So in total, he says that around 50,000 people were burned at the stakes or executed. And he spends a lot of pages talking about this number, because this is very disputed, and some say as low as, 30,000, 20,000, and some say 500,000, and it's very hard to find the exact number. And sometimes it's also very ideological, so high number, you can use this for your case, lower number, you can use this to argue something else. So, but maybe 50,000, maybe 100,000, I guess the most important thing is just a lot of people were burned at the stakes because other people thought that they were witch. They thought that they practiced evil magic. We can also look at the Bible, where it says that you shall not suffer a witch to live. So this is also one of the things where a king could read his Bible and then he could see, you shall not suffer a witch to live. So that's kind of, you have to kill a witch. So if you find out someone is a witch, or you accuse someone of being a witch, then you kind of have to kill them. When you read the Bible, you can't just say, well, let's just pardon her or let's imprison her, because it's just stated so clearly, do not suffer a witch to live. Another of the things that caused Europe to suddenly go on in this witch trial craze is the fact that, first of all, Europe was kind of under attack these years before the witch trials, and also sometimes during the witch trials. So, for example, we have the Mongols, which came from the east, and was a very big threat to Europe at one point. And just imagine being a European village, maybe on the east of Europe, or maybe also kind of in the middle of Europe. I'm not sure how long the Mongols went in, but I don't know, just having your city just razed, and I think that's quite traumatic. So, and people, they knew about this in Europe, even though you weren't directly attacked or you were outside the reach of the attacks. And also the Black Death, which killed just a lot of people, and which must have been extremely traumatic. And then we also have, the Turks, after the fall of Byzantium, which is, I think it's like 1480 or is it 1380? I'm not sure. But after the fall of Byzantium, the Turks could also go more into Europe. So it was kind of this society under attack. And then he talks about how the Christians kind of felt the need to close rank so that they would kind of purify their own groups, because to be able to survive, they couldn't have, evil people who practiced this magic, who maybe poisoned people or killed people or something. You needed to have, this pure society. Also with the thought about, if you just have some people in your midst that does these bad satanic things, then God can punish your whole society. We have this also often in the Bible, that it's kind of the whole city or the whole society can be punished just because a few individuals is not moral, does not uphold the moral principles. Torture was also a very important thing in these witch trials. So what often happened was that someone, let's say, okay, how do you get accused of being a witch one-on-one? Basically, in the beginning it might have been rich people, and then maybe they had a powerful enemy, maybe they were not popular in the town, could be a lot of things, and then they might get accused, and then we would have this whole trial. Later it also often started from below, where this city kind of maybe just panicked and then started accusing each other. And so let's say you have a neighbor you don't like, and maybe 5 years ago the neighbor was close to another child when it died, or cared for it when it died or something, and maybe your cow just died 2 weeks ago after you had a fight with this neighbor. And so you could also, that's kind of like maybe the basic for starting to say, maybe this is a witch because she has done these bad things that has happened, and we're not sure, why exactly do they happen. And so then you could blame human agency. You can say, well, this is because she has a pact with the devil. And so, okay, gets accused of being a witch, you get imprisoned, and then you would very often get tortured. And, if you torture people, usually you can get them to just say anything you want. And so these poor people would usually confess that, yes, I have been with the devil, yes, I have given a goat a ritual kiss on the anus, and the goat is kind of in the form of the devil. That was a thing that they talked about, how this ritual kiss on the anus of goat. I just thought that was kind of funny. And yeah, I had sex with the devil, and I fly and meet with other witches. You could get them to say anything, and they would do it because, they would just torture them horribly. And then sometimes after the torture, they would start to go, well, I didn't actually do it, because when they confess it, they're going to be burned on the stake. So now they're no longer under torture, and then they would be, well, I didn't do it, but they know that if they recant, if they say I didn't do it, then they might get tortured again, and they would get tortured again. So it's not a very nice thing. And often people would, sometimes, I guess it's hard to say how often they would get burned, but a lot of people got burned after being accused of a witch. Sometimes higher authorities would kind of like start a witch hunt, but sometimes they would also stop it. So if a little city, kind of backward city, started to accuse a lot of people of being witches, and then sometimes a kind of judge would come, or some higher representative would come, and they would see these cases, and then sometimes they would just stop it and release all the people. I found a kind of funny quotation he mentions in the book. It's from 1321, from a chronicle from a monastery, and what it says there is kind of like just before the witch hunt started. What it also says there is how easily you kind of just purged a part of the population that you didn't like, or you considered subhuman or not worthy of society. So what it says is that a great deal of snow fell in February. Lepers were exterminated. Much rain in April. So it's kind of funny how he just casually mentions that lepers, these people with, this disease that just makes your flesh kind of rot, like they were just exterminated. And just, by the way, we just exterminated the lepers. Oh yeah, and it was wonderful rain this next month. So there's just kind of, funny sentence, or maybe scary sentence. And so one thing he also discussed is, why did these witch hunts finally stop? And one thing he's mentioned is that a lot of people actually from the start saw how problematic witch hunts were, because you could prove anything with torture. You can torture someone and you can make them say just anything. And how are you really gonna prove someone were a witch? Because if you torture someone that's innocent, she will confess to being a witch just to avoid getting tortured. And people, they knew about this, and they argued about this. And also, if you torture a witch, then she's gonna probably confess as well. So I think one of the things that I heard they did in Denmark, in my country, was basically they put a witch in a bag and then threw her in the river. And I think if she fell to the bottom of the river, I think she was innocent, but then she would die. And if she was a witch, then she could actually float. I don't know. I'm not I haven't studied this. This is all just kind of what I heard. But yeah, guess it's bad to be a witch, and it's bad to be innocent. So unless they dove down, or got her up again before she died. But it seems that when a witch trial got underway in a community, and people actually experienced it, then sometimes that would kind of be all right, we tried this, and this is kind of horrible, or it's kind of, you can prove anything. And so, I don't know, it's kind of also maybe a bit mystery how exactly it stopped. And you could argue, well, people got more rational, and they learned from experience that this is very problematic. You can basically make anyone into a witch. And yeah, I guess people also just started to maybe change their view. People got more enlightened or something. I don't know. It's kind of like, it's also this, maybe it's kind of like this great question, and you can devote an entire book, 500 pages. Why did the witch hunt stop? Why did people stop doing this exactly? But yeah, all we can say, I guess, for certain right now is that we don't really burn witches today in our society anymore, and I think personally that's a pretty good thing that we don't burn people alive. Still torture people though, so that's probably not a good thing, but that's kind of a whole new book, whole other book.